I got a DM on Twitter/X where somebody was asking me, "Hey Luke, I'm just wondering if you think we're in the middle of a game crash, akin to like the 1980s and what happened there, because it seems like a lot of AAA games are releasing really in a poor state. Games that have tons of money relying on them are flopping. Studios are closing. There's mass layoffs. It seems like something very wrong is going on." And I thought it was an interesting question because, I mean, you see big games like AC Shadows, for example, that are shown off and have all sorts of different editions. And I know some, like we just talked about, some YouTubers will point to this and be like, wow, they finally crossed the line. Guys, like every big studio has been doing this for years. Are you just now realizing? Like, where have you been? Like, the deluxe edition of Madden is $100. And it's the same game as every other. And they're selling like $150 microtransaction within the game. Like, what are you talking about? This has always been a thing. Why are we just now getting upset about it? It drives me crazy. Other companies like EA are looking at adding ads into games. Andrew Wilson, the CEO of EA, says we have teams internally in the company right now investigating integrating ads into the games that they have. Like, without a doubt, the industry is pushing for more revenue. That's not a doubt. Okay, that's not a doubt. Everybody can see that. Quality standards, we've also gotten a lot of flops. Now, I've been questioning this. I was like, somebody asked, why do you think we've been having so many flops recently? And I was like, have we actually had more flops than usual? Yes, we'll get something like a Forspoken, for example. And Forspoken is just like laughably cringe. Really, 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 really cringe. But like, we've also had a lot of really crappy games in years past, like a lot. Oh no, she turned it sideways. Oh, watch out. Like, we've gotten a lot of really bad games. Is it disproportional now? And I think the answer is no. We've always had bad games. I think the bad games we're getting now are just much more visible, because even games like Gollum, in years past, a game like Gollum would have released and would have been quickly forgotten and abandoned and moved on from. Like, I don't think anybody would have really talked about it. It just would have been forgotten. Oh yeah, this thing. But nowadays, it's super, super visible. The clips go viral on TikTok, on Twitch, on YouTube Shorts, everything. I think that that's a big factor in it. So my perspective, and I've tried to go back and like count up big flops and everything and be like, okay, well, in 2023, how many catastrophically bad games did we have? And then I go back to 2015 and I try to count up how many terrible games we have. Because even when you go back to like worst games of, I don't know, let's just pick a random year, 2016. If we go back to that and it's like a collection of the charts, Ghostbusters, I didn't even realize that. Mighty Number 9, Pokemon Go. Are these the worst? Pokemon Go ended up being big. Back in 1995. Hyrule Warriors Legends. I think that one was super broken. No Man's Sky, also super, super broken. It's funny. Some of these have made turnarounds. Battleborn, that's right. Homefront Revolution disappointed some people. Recourse, Star Fox Zero, Mirror's Edge, Catalyst, Mafia 3, also super broken. Like, you look back at a lot of these games and it's like, oh yeah, there were a lot of flops and crashes during that year. If we go back here, worst games of like 2013 was a decent year, wasn't it? North Star Ken's Rage, I don't remember that. Final Fast and Furious, oh yeah, well of course that sucked. Girl Fight, no way. Is Girl Fight, that's a game? Okay. Knack, biggest and best launch titles, but it turned out to be a linear, unimpressive Ratchet and Clank X snooze fest. Soul Sacrifice, Star Trek, Barbie Dreamhouse Party. Okay, I've got to see this game. Barbie Dreamhouse Party. Oh, wow.
They're all very spacious. Even the bathroom, which has a huge open area in the middle. But one thing is noticeably missing, which is the toilet. I guess it's possible that it's hidden away with the wardrobe, which is accessible in every room in the right.
Dude, it's giving me a migraine just looking at it. So the point is with a lot of this stuff is that there's a lot of games that have released for years and years and years that lacked quality. typically those games would release and be forgotten. Like a lot of these games on this list, we've just kind of forgotten about or never heard of. Others made comebacks, but they started really rough, like a No Man's Sky. Now it's come back, but back in 2016, it was crucified, you know? So I don't feel like we have disproportionately more terrible games. I just feel they're much more visible and memeable now than ever. So that's part of it. No doubt we've had, you know, big AAA releases that are catastrophic failures, you know, Suicide Squad being one. But like we've also had AAA sized games that flop and are terrible and way worse than promised in years past. Again, No Man's Sky, when it launched, everybody was like, wow, Sony really hyped this game up. How did it end up being this bad? And then it ended up being a total disaster. Or something like Mass Effect Andromeda. At some point, you've got to get the cutoff and you've got to be able to say, okay, this is when the market started crashing, or this is when big games started flopping, or this or that. But it's kind of hard to pinpoint that because there's always been big AAA games that flop or were rushed out or this or that. And I think you're right. Every few years, people are saying, oh, well, the games industry is collapsing. Everything's dying. Game over, Red Rover, you know, everything's terrible. But having said that, I do think something different is going on now that is special. Okay, so while we may have the same number of terrible games as we've always had, I do think something has changed. And that is something that's also affecting the movie industry as well. Oh, Paul Tassi wrote this article too. Paul's everywhere, dude. It's not shocking that Furiosa is struggling at the box office despite reviews. So Furiosa, if you don't know, it's like a new movie in the Mad Max universe. It's like a prequel, is my understanding. Yeah, those who have seen Furiosa, Mad Max Saga may be wringing their hands that a movie that good is doing so poorly. Just a $25 million opening, but unfortunately it was not expected or exactly set up for success from the start. A few reasons though. And basically it just seems like it's a film that's not actually coming together. It's the worst like Memorial Day weekend launch of a film in like 29 years or something like that. It's just a total bummer compared to what they were expecting it to do. But I think that there's a handful of things that are happening in the films industry and then also what's happening in the games industry. Value has shifted. The perception of value shifted, and it's shifted because of streaming, because of TikTok and YouTube and streamers. Entertainment in general has shifted. What's verifiable is that people are kind of burnt out on just constant sequels and spin-offs and stuff like that. They're not going out and engaging with it anymore like they used to, and that's quantifiable. You can see it. Where Marvel used to be able to just put out anything and make $1 billion on it, now they're getting consistent flops when they put stuff out because people are just not really interested in it. And they can kind of see that these are just soulless, formulaic movies that are just being pumped out as quickly as they can be. And so people have started to disconnect with it. And in the games industry, it's a similar thing where people have started to disconnect from the constant cycle of sequels and are starting to get kind of frustrated by it. And like, can we get anything that's not just a remaster, remake, or like a quick sequel that's meant to just cash in on nostalgia and stuff? Like, can we just get something original and fresh? And it feels like a lot of these big entertainment companies in the gaming space and in the film space are spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars putting all of these chips on something like a Furiosa or something like a Suicide Squad, which on paper you would think would do really well. People love Mad Max. We'll make another Mad Max movie, put it out Memorial Day weekend, boom, we'll make $500 million or $1 billion. It'll do great. Or people love superhero movies. Let's just make 5 of them and release them next month together. We'll make billions. It'll be great. We used to be able to do that, and now it just doesn't really work. But something shifted. I think COVID accelerated it a bit when people were locked at home, but I think it was already going on before that. And that's just that people have started to burn out on that formulaic approach to entertainment. And I think it's because TikTok is extremely candid. Streaming is very, very, very candid. People like that genuine connection with entertainers, and Hollywood and corporate gaming is the antithesis of that. You know, they are the opposite of candid and intimate experiences between people. It's games made by committee, films made by committee, and they lack soul and interesting plot points, and it just doesn't really click, you know. click. People didn't change. It was the products. They started pushing agendas. I'm not so sure if that's the case. I mean, I do think there are or have been some instances where like films, TV, things like that have started certainly prioritizing preaching their various like political stances or whatever else above and beyond the entertainment value. And it's like, wait, we're supposed to make interesting characters, but this character slays, right? And then you snap with your fingers. Like, and they thought that was going to be enough. So there certainly have been instances like that. Nobody's doubting that. But I also think that people have changed what they expect from these big companies. They don't want the same slop that they got served for a decade. Like they had their fill and now they're moving on. I mean, people point to Marvel all the time and they're like, oh, the Marvelification of entertainment, because we've seen this also in the gaming space where like every character needs to have the witty comeback and be like super, super cool. The example is always like the Forspoken dialogue. Let's just sit back and enjoy.
I just move shit with my mind.
Perhaps our connection has somehow awoken some abilities.
Oh, I saw this clip on Twitter.
I just
Oh,
move
yucky.
shit with my mind. That is something I do now. I do magic, talk to sentient cuss, kill jacked up beasts. You know what? I'll probably fly next.
Now you're just being ridiculous.
Oh, that's too far. Good to know there's a line.
If you could
It's like because Chris Pratt did this in one movie or because Paul Rudd did it goofily or Ryan Reynolds while playing Deadpool, now everybody feels like you should have characters that kind of play with the audience a little bit and are joking around a little bit. You know, it drives me a little crazy. So I think that there is a certain effect where this type of writing was assumed to be like, well, people liked it in this movie or when this actor did it, let's have everybody do it now. And it's just so cringy. It just doesn't work. So I think there's stuff like that going on. But without a doubt, there's multiple layers of problems here. There's frustration. And as I've said before, perception is reality with this stuff. If the perception is among the gaming community that these companies are prioritizing like preaching or activism above entertainment value, that's what the studio has to deal with. Whether or not they're intentionally doing it or not, the problem is still there, right? It doesn't actually matter if they like were wringing their hands. Oh, we'll do this and we'll try to brainwash them by putting in all these characters and doing the woke to everybody. Like, even if they weren't doing that, it's still the problem they've got to fix, right? So it doesn't really matter if it was intentional or not. They've got to deal with it. And in the same way, the perception is that companies are prioritizing activism. They're prioritizing, monetization schemes. They're prioritizing all these other things above and beyond the quality of the actual experience. And then when you get a game that comes along and just seems to be a good game, people connect with it and people are really into it. Like we saw with, say, a Helldivers or a Baldur's Gate 3. Nobody really cared that much about how badass the characters were or how many times they'd stop and start snapping when the characters did something that slayed. I cannot believe I just said that. Nobody cared about that because the game was just good. That's that. Full stop. The game was good, so people enjoyed it and people bought it and were happy with it. And it seems like that's just been forgotten both in Hollywood and it's also been forgotten in the gaming space where it's like, oh, yeah. Because I think for a while in the mid-2010s, entertainment became very formulaic. And part of it was Marvel, I think. Part of it was like the onset of these huge franchises in gaming, for example, that blew up and that they could just announce a sequel to that would pop off and do really well. But things have shifted and changed, both intentionally and unintentionally. I think it's both the content and it's both the content and it's also that people have changed what they expect, because audiences do change and evolve over time. You go back and you look at some of the movies that released in like the 2004, 2005, 2006 era, and you're like, that was like a blockbuster hit, really? It's always like, huh, crazy, interesting. Wild. Yeah. I bet the writers were so proud of themselves and felt so cool. Well, dude, I pointed this out before. Saints Row, probably just gameplay, the first hour. I pointed this out because like I look at some of this stuff. Let me just get to when they meet the friends. I look at this and I say to myself, wow, this is a group of people I would never want to hang out with. Because like if you're going to show up wearing a fanny pack, strike one already. I'm not sure if I trust you if you wear a fanny pack. Strike two, you're indoors with your shirt off. Why? Is it hot in there? No, this guy's wearing a suit, so it can't be that hot in the room. And then beyond that, you're wearing headphones while just standing there. Like, what are you doing? What do you have against fanny packs? If you wear a fanny pack, I assume you're a very confident person. I just don't like fanny packs. It's not that complicated. I just don't really like fanny packs. But like, I just, every part of this guy is just a turn off. I'm like, okay, I'm good. She's fine, whatever. But when you start talking to all of these guys and they start, the wage slave, giving you crap because you have a job. Like, all of this is just so freaking cringy. When I first played it, I thought this was like a commentary on how stupid millennials and Gen Z were or are with how they hate work and then complain about being poor. And it's like, oh yeah, so that's kind of like the funny thing. And then I realized, no, they're being serious. This is supposed to be like a connection between the player and these characters. They're supposed to hear these characters complaining about student loans and then giving each other crap for having jobs and stuff. And you're supposed to be like, these guys are awesome. I want to spend all my time with them, But once I realized that this was being played straight, that they wanted this to be like a serious connection between player and character, that's when I realized we had a serious problem. Because you showed this to anybody, and they should be able to tell you, oh yeah, this is not going to go over well. This is going to be like this. This is going to be roasted. And yet somehow they didn't do that. And by most accounts, it seems like they were genuinely surprised at the negative reception, which just pause and think about that for a second. How disconnected from the broader like culture of the gaming sphere would you have to be to think that gamers would see this and go, slay queen? How disconnected would you have to be? It's just cringe. It's just cringe. Like, just let me play the dialogue and remember that this was the best they had.
Supposed to be. Got stiffed on my bonus today.
Dude, what the fuck?
I played a little fast and loose on the job and, my CEO wasn't a fan.
You gotta be kidding me.
Swear to God, this lady walked right off the set of an 80s action movie. I was half expecting her to call me Rook and threaten to take my badge.
Are we gonna make rent?
We'll make rent. We just gotta be a little more creative.
Last time we got creative, I got stabbed 3 times.
Hey, it would have been 4 times if Nina and I hadn't shown up.
It would have been 0 times if you were on time.
This is true. Look, this is really not a big deal. We just knock off a payday loan place. No one gives a shit if people rob those bastards.
You have a job now. You could actually just take the loan.
Eli, I don't do business with morally bankrupt companies.
You worked for Marshall.
Morally bankrupt companies. So let's rob them. It's just so funny, dude. It's like, yes, I'm morally superior. Yes, I work for a military contracting company that kills people. Yes, we would technically be robbing them, but it's okay. It's just like, Luke, how would you feel if all the characters were wearing Crocs? Depends on if they're socks as well. Just Crocs? Okay. If you're wearing socks and Crocs and you think it's like formal attire, uh-oh. Ooh. So anyway, with all this stuff though, I think that there is something where there's a lack of like connection with it. And more than anything, what people just at their core don't like is they don't like feeling lectured to, and they don't like it when companies have contempt for them. Shocker, right? It's like all those examples of the celebrities that will say like, well, if you don't like it, don't come see my movie. And then the audience doesn't see the movie and the movie flops. It's like, yeah, because you didn't want me there, so I didn't go and see it. Same thing with this, is it's like people were giving Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League crap because of character designs and stuff. And right now, like, because it's been data mined, I won't show it because it's still coming out. It's not like the game's been canned or anything. But if you want to find it, you can find it. The pictures of the next playable character have leaked for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. And people were quite disappointed by the character design. Quite disappointed. Not only was it an odd choice as a character to go that route compared to the layup of the other option. But yeah, if you want to Google it, you can find it. Just Suicide Squad next playable character leak or whatever. That being said, though, people saw that and people have been like generally frustrated. They saw the design of Joker and were really frustrated by it. I showed in my video, which shout out to everybody. It's the top search result when you search Suicide Squad, which is kind of funny. I showed the like side by side. Like you can't even make it up. This is their Titan Formula Joker skin. And this is how he actually appeared in a game a decade ago. Some people said some pretty nasty things about it, but that I won't repeat here. But people were like, this is like a just really weird, like Jared Leto-esque attempted sexy joke. Like, what are we doing? I don't understand it. But we're supposed to like look at it and start cheering. And it's like, again, you showed this to anybody before launch, and I think they could have told you that this was going to be received poorly. And yet they just put it out, and then they're really surprised when the reception's poor. And I think a lot of it is that they just don't, like, honestly, they're out of touch with their actual fans. And I think that's the biggest problem at the core of all of this, is simply that a lot of these big studios either have disdain for their actual community and fan base, or they are so out of touch with that community and fan base that they don't know, like they don't actually know what they need to do to win them over, you know? Because again, so many of these games, it's like if you talk to anybody, you would think they would have been able to point out that this doesn't make sense, that this is a bad idea. Like it just, but they didn't. And then they release it and they're genuinely shocked. It's the same thing with Forspoken, where that game comes out and like some of the writers were genuinely shocked that the reception was so bad, that people were so pissed off about it and were mocking it so incessantly. And it's like, yeah, because people don't talk that way. Like they're at an arraignment and the judge for some reason lets her go. But in the process of arguing it, she's like, no, I have a bright future. I have good grades. Like all the exposition in the world all at once. It's why I get excited when I hear that like a company or a studio is willing to get outside perspectives. Like I've done work with companies over the years where they will like come in and hire me and or other YouTubers to look at games and offer our feedback ahead of time. And they're like, just tell us what you think. Like be as harsh or as nice as you want. Just come out and tell us what you think. What do you think the audience out there will say when they see this? I try to be very upfront and honest with it, but at least they are listening. At least they're open to it. And a lot of companies don't. They just don't actually care, you know? Do they actually listen? Out of the times I've done it, there was one time where they did make a pretty substantial change. Most of the time, they're like, okay. You can tell it was probably like one member of the like executive team was like, we should bring in outsiders to look at the game and offer feedback. And like, that's it. You know, like, I'm not saying they should make total changes based on what a few YouTubers say, but I'm like, if you bring in 5 to 10 YouTubers or streamers and they all cover games for a living and they all agree on like one point that's bad, you should probably seriously consider changing that, you know? Like, I'm not saying they should be like, oh, well, we showed this game footage to Asmongold and he didn't like that there wasn't a lot of grind. He wanted more grind. And then they change everything about it. It's like, okay, that was probably a bad choice. But if you show it to 10 creators or 10 gamers and they all tell you the same thing, that's probably a red flag, you know? Probably a red flag. Judson, thank you for the 5. I think the problem they showing the message front and center, yelling to game audiences instead of doing background and subtle hints. I get the impression that a lot of game writers think that audiences are stupider than they are and that they need more hand holding. Gamers are smart. Gamers are very, very capable. Very, very capable. You just have to like trust them to figure it out. Oh my God. I just saw Sweet Baby Freeze. I don't know what Clownfish TV is, but it's showing up in my recommended feed. But like that character design, if you put that together, like seriously, who would have thought that would be received well by the broader gaming community? Like, I don't know. I'm seriously baffled. Yeah, it's just, there is subverting expectations. And then there's that. Like, you have X that everyone expects. So subverting it might be like, ooh, it's X plus Y, and it's awesome. It equals happiness. But instead of X, they could just straight up deliver X, and people would probably be like, okay. Okay. But instead of this, they choose to go, let's do squiggle, and then plus, I don't even know how to draw it. Let's do turd, and you know, it's a stinky turd. It looks like a wizard's hat. And then this equals views. You know, on the one hand, this is something I need clipped out of context. That's the sorting hat. It does actually look like a sorting hat. Yeah, and then this, we're going to take red squiggle times red squiggle, and then they expect it to equal money. Maybe that's the problem with all these companies. They ask Terrence Howard to do the math on whether like the statistic analysis will make sense for these products. All of this to say, they could very easily just deliver X and be successful. Do Mr. Freeze, people will be generally happy. Okay, it's a cool character, cool moves, whatever. And then you could really subvert expectations, do Mr. Freeze, but maybe you actually hired Arnold Schwarzenegger to do the voice. You actually spent millions to get him to do the voice like in the 90s movies. And that will go meme worthy. It'll pop off, be hugely successful. People will love it. People will eat it up. Imagine if they did that. Imagine if they announced Mr. Freeze is the next playable character and Arnold Schwarzenegger voices him. It's going to be awesome. People would lose their minds, right? Instead of doing any of this, they decide what is objectively worse than Mr. Freeze. An unknown character nobody's really ever heard of in the form of his daughter that is represented by squiggly line. And then let's also design the character in a way where thematically maybe it's very appropriate, where she actually looks like a walking refrigerator. Then that will lead us to lots of views, which is true, but they expected it to lead them by multiplying it by itself using some teriology. It was going to lead to massive success of the game because people would be so stoked on it. It just doesn't make any sense, especially when they could ask literally anybody and they could tell you, oh no, these views you're getting, yeah, that'll go viral when that's really, yeah, that people are going to talk about that. But it's going to go viral for all of the wrong reasons. It's going to be, look how out of touch they are. Look how laughably stupid this is. Nobody's going to be re-downloading the game or buying it for $70 to play as like the daughter of Mr. Freeze, the daughter of the character they actually wanted to play as. Just no part of it makes any sense at all. And it makes you wonder, like, how did we get here? How did we get here? Did we get here because they thought, honestly, gamers would like it? Because as far as I can tell, there's a couple of options. Option A is that they were just honestly like mistaken and they thought that gamers would actually like it. So in that case, I think they would just be out of touch, right? So option A is that they're out of touch. They thought gamers would actually look at that design for the character after all the troubles and everything that the game had before it even launched. They thought gamers would be really stoked on it and it would be super successful. In which case, they're just out of touch if they thought that, because anybody could have told them that wouldn't be the case. Option B is that they knew it wouldn't be received well and they didn't care, which is almost worse. Because at least here, they thought they were delivering something that their audience would like. In this case, they actually are putting something together they know a lot of people are going to be upset by or pissed off about. Don't care. Don't care. At least they were trying with option A. With option B, they have active contempt for their own fan base and audience, which I think is the broader feeling. Like, There's no way they are so out of touch they thought that was going to be received well. There is no way. I don't buy that for a second. What I'm guessing is that they thought, ooh, that slays. And anybody upset about it is just like a jerk or something. Banana thinks it's a combination of A and B. So Banana, I appreciate you playing devil's advocate. Do you think they're out of touch in the sense they didn't think the blowback would be that bad? Or do you think they thought that maybe it was just a very vocal tiny minority of people? Because honestly, like if we go over to the subreddit, which granted is currently not the best representation because the subreddit has pretty much imploded at this point. Even the people still stoked about it are just showing glitches and stuff. That's funny. Looks like they've cleared out all of references to it, which fair. I mean, it's data mined. I think that's fair. Let's see, Banana. I think they're out of touch for what people want, but also don't care if it has negative response as long as it makes money. Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think when I say don't care, I specifically mean that they knew that the discourse and the response from their own community would be highly negative, which, I mean, already it has been. They've had to like nuke the sub for any references of it. That sub hates you. Oh yeah, dude, you're telling me. Honestly, some of the posts were pretty funny. Before the game launched, people were like, yeah, Luke's going to be eating his words when the game comes out and he sees how awesome it is. It's a little funny. It's a little funny, honestly. I just think like, however we spin it, like they're out of touch in the sense that to get this game to reach mainstream appeal and popularity, they have to do something very different, very, very different. But instead of like trying to alter it and give fans like what they really wanted, which are like those fun references, give them the Mr. Freeze with Arnold Schwarzenegger or something fun like that as a crossover, or do a whole season around the Riddler and the Riddler is played by Nick Cage or something. Like you could do all sorts of crazy fun stuff with how much money they've spent on marketing this game. They could have done something really, really novel and interesting, but instead they thought that they could just make these Overwatch-esque characters and expect it to just make magic money. And it's just, it doesn't work. The Hellblade 2 Reddit is upset with you, Luke. Oh, really? Oh, I'm just pissing off everybody on Reddit. I did notice somebody posted the like review to a subreddit, and then there was like a flood of like 100 or so dislikes on the video within like 5 or 10 minutes. It was pretty funny. I was like, oh, that's dead giveaway. Dead giveaway. I was like, I stand by everything I said in that game or in that video. Stand by it all. People feel free to disagree. Like that's totally fine. But yeah, I found it very, very underwhelming. But anyway, with all this, I've tried to figure out how this could not just go wrong initially, because at the outset, okay, Suicide Squad is a live service game. People didn't really want a live service game. I get it. So maybe that's why, you know, they're doing their best, but they're just fighting an uphill battle. But then you're like, but they keep making persistently worse decisions. Like just when they could dig themselves out of the trench a little bit, they double down on the worst parts of it. And then they act like insulted that people are dissatisfied with it. It's like, okay, well now I don't feel so bad for you, you know? He took my thing.